get started with a little bit of humor. Python is very permissive when it comes to casting types on thing. Board F-150 string, yeah, why not? All right, well, it's June 5th here in the US of A. Starting off on our rebrand as California Python. All right, we've got back again, but this time for the first time with CalPy. Dr.
Yeah.
Tanim Islam of Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and once in few well a few times gracious host of mine, uh, talking about a project he's presented on a handful of times before, and more importantly to my own lived experience, something I have very much benefited from. So, some of the behind the scenes magic of how he manages his DIY serving or streaming service via Plex. And so
Right. Yes.
this is an update on a thing he calls Howdy. So I'm going to stop the share and head it off to you. Take it away, Tanim.
All right. Let's try this again. Meeting, start share, and let's go to where does it go? Yep, here we go. Share this. All right. So let me go to full screen mode or play mode, play slideshow. So what I'm showing here, let's move it here. A custom transmission client demo. And so this is part of the SDK that Woody introduced called Howdy, which I used for the automation and administration of this Plex media server, which allows streaming for me and also friends of the Plex server, a few of which are actually in this audience. All right, just my email address at the bottom. So what gives? Well, why did I do this, or what brought about this, mini lecture? We'll see how long it takes. Is that until a few weeks ago, or maybe closer to a month and a half ago, my standard go-to server, which is it's a kind of torrent server, which is called Deluge, was crapping out. It just wasn't working. I was submitting torrents to it, and they were just not downloading. I couldn't figure out why. So, in an emergency sense, I thought, okay, I've got to, spin up a custom, instead of a Deluge server, a transmission server on this remote host, and also quickly implement a custom, transmission client to that transmission server. And part of that was also creating, the API so that all my automation tools for, getting the media that myself and others expect in their day-to-day would continue to work. And lucky for me, it wasn't an impossible process. It only took me, puttering around for a day and a half of programming and a lot of basically at least API name calling convention duplication. So, but here's really why I continued. The documentation for the transmission torrent servers API is first class. It's actually really robustly maintained by several people. It's got a big community behind it. In contrast, the stuff with Deluge torrent servers documentation is much more bespoke, custom, and it was, I think, last updated 4 or 5 years ago. Another big value add is that the transmission client allows for pausing and resuming of torrents, which I'll actually demonstrate in an API as well as with the command line tool, which I say in the last point. I'm demonstrating this custom client in the API sense in a Jupyter notebook and through CLI that I implemented quickly. So to put it all in context, This is a Plex server, or specifically a player that hooks up to this Plex server, this media server that lives upstairs, in officey storage space. Oh, what does Twinkles want? He wants to play. I think he wants to just hang up there. All right, he'll scream at me if he gets uncomfortable there. But yes, so this is one kind of player. It's actually a desktop client or desktop player on Mac OS. I use the one for Apple TV. You could also Roku, Chromecast, iOS, just on the iPhone and iPad are also other players. And those are 5 out of, I think, 80 or so that Plex, the company, actually actively develops.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with Plex, this is basically a kind of DIY drop-in for a service like Netflix, for example.
Or Hulu, yes.
Yeah,
And the benefit.
so I had the benefit of getting to see Tanim operate some of this, and it's pretty cool that he's created a bunch of these automations that we're going to learn about. And you can see some of the past recordings. This one should be a little bit brief, but he's operating this thing typically while watching Plex, and we're hanging out with Twinkles, and he's just doing it off his tablet, and it's pretty cool. Because running a Plex server is not the easiest thing because every single thing there, it's not a whole company doing it. It's just Tanim, and he does it pretty casually, so it's cool.
I'm not going to spend all my time doing it. So, to be fair, if stuff is too hard to do, I just tell people, yeah, I'm not going to do that. If they request, and this brings up to this thing, is Ombi is another do-it-yourself server. It's programmed, maintained by somebody else, but the way it works is it's sort of like a microservice you put on your server. In the plain vanilla case, it's you open up a port, but you can use a reverse proxy like Nginx to expose, that location on your local machine to the rest of the internet. So Nginx and reverse proxies are just a way of saying, oh, here's a server sitting on this local machine at a port, and I want to map that to a, sub address that anybody in the external internet can see, at least the way I see it. All right. So, these are a bunch of links. It's basically the background for people who want to dive deeper or try to understand what I'm doing or try to make something that works for themselves. There's the transmission RPC API documentation. This is the API I actually call for my functionality. I built this on top of that Python module, transmission-RPC. The stuff here, core-transmission submodule, there's actually now Sphinx documentation. And if you click on this link, it'll go to that describes, all the methods associated with this submodule. And I hope to get to this in the meeting is, demonstration of the command line tool. Oh, are people asking some questions here? I didn't know.
Nick was chiming in that he also runs a Plex server and he has a logo he's crafted.
Nick. Oh, Plex. There it is. Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
I didn't want to out you there, Nick. So
actually a video too.
Oh, awesome.
That's why I mentioned several other people in this audience are familiar, at least familiar with Plex. All right. So, bunch of words, but the basic idea is what I'm trying to show in the demonstrations, 2 of them, if I get to it, is one torrent file, which is just a way of saying some kind of file that represents how to get at those, those things using the BitTorrent protocol, and 2 magnet links. You see something that's a text. It was basically Woody's suggestion. Don't put that big long ass thing in there. And so you'll see that later on, at least demonstration of it. And the second is a magnet link to another, Linux ISO. The way I think of a magnet link is like for a URL for a website is, an HTTP link. This is just the URL equivalent for communicating over the BitTorrent network with other torrent servers and clients to, get at those, files in a torrent. But instead of having the whole torrent file in there, it's sort of a URL that then, eventually gets resolved. It's sort of a lightweight thing. The way I think of it is, a website could be the HTML in it, which you can share, or it could be the URL, the hyperlink to that website. I figured I'm not, deeply technically minded in the space, so I'm getting not 100% of the details, but 80% of the details, at least as I see it. A magnet link is to a torrent file, a torrent file, as a hyperlink is to a full-fledged website. Okay, so this simple, silly graph is just saying what exactly the torrent client does, either in an API sense or command line tool sense. It queries the status of torrents on the server, adds the torrents as files, URLs, or magnet links, and does operations, on that. Pauses, removes, resumes, removes, or obliterates them. And by obliterate, I mean it removes a reference to the torrent on the torrent server, as well as deletes all the files, all the data it's downloaded so far. All right. So are you guys ready to go right now? Just tell me if I need to stop for a bit, if anybody has any questions.
Shout out to the Blender organization for Big Buck Bunny.
Yes, that's true. That's what the Jupyter Notebook is going to demonstrate, downloading that torrent from a magnet link, the Big Buck Bunny. Yes, that thing. All right, so let's go to, okay, let's see. Let's stop the share and let's start the share of the browser. Let's see, Vivaldi. Share this, and let's see if it can go here. So does everybody see this thing called Jupyter 2025-06-05 demo transmission client?
Looking good.
Okay, so I'm gonna restart it, and there's gonna be, some sort of iterative process. In fact, I'm going to do a lot of refreshes programmatically. So when I do that, I hope it'll be clear. I'll definitely say it, but just to give you guys a heads up. So first do the import. And so, the reason I didn't put that big thing on there, you see that string goes on and on and on and on. But, we're going to start with both the, torrent file name, the magnet link for Big Buck Bunny, as well as for Arch Linux. Although in the API, in the Jupyter Notebook, we'll just do Big Buck Bunny there. All right, we got this. Okay, hopefully this works. It's worked so far, but let's see. Yep, and shout out to DN and the people who had discussions on tuples. This thing, spits out a 2-element tuple. The actual, if everything works, it'll spit out the transmission RPC client object, that big client thing, and a status saying success. Yes, we're good to go. And here it is, the Big Buck Bunny, which I won't open up. But the way this works, or the way that my API is structured, let's just add it. And here we go. And what it does is, if it adds it successfully, it gives the, MD5 hash of that torrent. Now, you see this thing here? This will spit out all the statuses in a dictionary. And then we just select the status the key would be, the torrent ID for Big Buck Bunny. And the status is another dictionary. You see there? And I said, look at the progress key. Oof. Active time and seeding time. You see, right now, it hasn't really started yet. And typically, at least when we did the shakedown yesterday, it took a few seconds to get it. But, this is sort of what it expects to find in the torrent file. The files in there, that file's, key says it's going to find this file and its expected size, another file, that expected size. And, all the files in there is, a bunch of, as a list. And each entry in the list is a dictionary with the path and the size in bytes.
Right. That's, if it was downloading that third value, download payload rate would be showing you the rate in bytes.
Yep.
Or something.
Megabit or kilobit, bits per second, actually.
Bits per second. Okay.
And that's a good question. And here we go. See, now it's downloading at 8.97 megabits per second, or 8.97. And we look at its active time, 91 seconds, and it's 37.4%. Now what we're going to do is just pause it. And so you can start to believe me. It says, let's see if its status is stopped. It says 53.57%, but more importantly, let's go to the shell. And one of the things I should point out, if you guys have used Jupyter Notebooks or a Jupyter Hub server, not only can you, open and launch and create notebooks, you can also create, launch a login shell, which is what I've done here. So this is a login shell in a Jupyter Notebook, that's basically a shell on my local machine. And here we go. You see, we're actually on the remote server called SeedHost.
And so,
and here it is, Big Buck Bunny.
Tanim Islam at Flow is you talking to that box up in the office?
What was that?
That's you talking to the server up in the office?
Yeah, wherever. When I'm on my tablet here, I can SSH into it to see, how are things going. And it does. There's actually a very nice SSH client for iOS. Really works for iPads called Termius, which is really, really very slick. I can't imagine doing any sort of, administration via SSH client on an iPad any other way. I tried a few other apps. I just had too much of a, usability headache trying to use them because they were so limited, not different functionality, but rather much less functionality. Okay, so here we are. You see number 8 here, it says it stopped. Now what we're going to do is, resume it. All right, okay, we just tell the server, all right, I'm good to go, but you notice these torrent servers, those torrent clients on the BitTorrent network are pretty impatient. See the download rate, payload rate went to 0 and 0 in the upload. They're like, I'm not there. All right, screw you. Call me back when you need me again. And so we're going to go through the same shuffle as we did before. How are we doing? Oh, okay, they're looking at me again. All right, now we're at, 2.899. What is it? 28, how many is that? Oh, yeah, 2.9 megabits per second.
Yeah.
It's 58.4%. Now we're at 63. And this might take a while, so I guess, has any of you used like command line or GUI clients for torrent servers, like BitTorrent sort of clients, whatever flavor?
Back in the day, but now I use Usenet for everything.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you have to pay money for that, or do you use it for free?
Kind of a complicated question. You have to pay for like, subscription sites so that index Usenet, for some of those. And then for the actual like clients and all that, that's all free. But then you also have to pay for access to a Usenet server. But it's all very minimal, less than like $10 a month. So
Gotcha. Well, a seed house server is, in my case, €6 a month.
mhm.
So here we go. Downloading 94%. Okay. Let's see. See that? All right. Okay. Seeding. All right. We're good to go. We're done. And let's just check now on that server. Or rather, let's just confirm, at least for me, that it's done. When it's done, that means all the files have been fully downloaded and the video files are valid. So I'm going to just go into that directory, and I'm not going to start playing it here. I guess I could SCP a copy to anybody who wants, but I'm going to check the metadata. And this, if you see down here, can everybody see that? This thing called MP4 info is just saying, this is an MP4 file. Let me get at the metadata. I know Robert and I talked about it, a few years ago when I showcased a different project. But yes, it just says, oh, look, okay. It looks like the metadata is correct, there. Or rather, it's complete. It's, a little over 10 minutes long, 10 and a half minutes long, and 8,000 kilobits per 8 megabits per second video, 122 kilobits per second audio, and with sort of metadata information, name, artist, the Blender Foundation, and stuff like that. Another way is with a tool called FFmpeg, which is used for conversion. But if you just use it -I, it'll tell you. Here you go, Twinkles. It'll tell you, some details on the file, and it looks like, it looks good enough to me. Yes, just it's basically telling me it's a valid video file with, basic information on the video and audio streams associated with this. Oh, it looks like it has multiple sort of tracks too. All right, good to know. All right. So, okay, we've done that so far. And now let me see if I can go back to, let me go to the view here. Let me go to the next. Sorry, this, what is it? This thing is Vivaldi. Let me file, view. Okay, let me go to here. Now what I'm going to do, step 8, is what we're going to do is remove that torrent. And you see this optional flag, remove data equals false. If I set it to true, it would not only remove a reference to the torrent on the server, it would also remove whatever data is there. So what I do, okay, it's removed. And when I say, what's the status of all the torrents on there? Well, there are no longer any torrents running. So it's an empty dictionary. All right. So that's API usage, and let's try something else. This is something where the API is more a demonstration of functionality that my automated tools actually use, under the hood. Like what it does is it uses the API to, take any torrent magnet links it's found, or torrent files, or torrent URLs it's found, and push them to the server, polls them, every 30 to 60 seconds to figure out the status. And once they're done, once they're seeding or paused, then just removes it and, basically through some machinery, some chicanery, moves that to my Plex server sitting upstairs from me. But what I use when I'm doing a more manual process, which Woody experienced a little bit of probably 2 months ago, is using a command line tool, which I will demonstrate here. And here, okay, you see, this thing, the torrent server, the Ubuntu, 24.04.2 live server. You'll see, this Arch Linux thing. Here's the magnet link there. And you'll see, Big Buck Bunny here. Everybody following so far?
Yep.
Okay. So with Howdy transmission console, remember I mentioned that? Let's look at the help there. Add. All right. Yes. I'm trying to make it not too complicated. You can also add the magnet link. I guess the documentation on the transmission RPC module, GitHub page as well as the Sphinx documentation says, there's no guarantee that any of these operations will be immediate. It basically tries to do a best effort on any of the operations, like pushing torrents, pausing it, resuming it, deleting them. And finally, so the time it takes to, get everything done is not necessarily immediate. Let's see if it will. Okay. So now I'm just checking the status on the server. Oh, wow. See, everything was done very quickly. And you looked at, let's see what's on the server right now. Big Buck Bunny, 4K, 60 frame per second. Ubuntu, ISO. Let's take a look to see, at least to convince me that this is what it is. Well, the file operation, basically a Linux command says, yeah, this is an ISO, and it's, CD ISO format, so you can mount it on disk and it will install properly. It's about a little over 3 gigabytes in size. And now, remember, API side, I said, here's how to, remove it. Here, I'm going to show how to remove -r AF8. So notice here, I didn't have to, submit the full, hash for the torrent. You just give an identifying, substring of it. Typically, non-clobbering substrings. So that is the substring that's unique. So typically 3 characters are enough for me. So let's look at the, okay. All right. And let's look at here. Ooh, well, okay. So at least those 2 have been obliterated. This is an interesting thing. This is something I'm noticing how the transmission, server works. Some files, some torrents, it will, have stuff on disk in a partial state or in its final location, the downloads directory in the partial state. Others, it will, sort of wait until it's done before it puts it on there. Let's look at it again. Ooh, got slow again. Pause. 49E. Let's look at its status again. It stopped. And let's resume.
I have many questions about this when you're ready.
Sure, yeah, fire away.
This is cool, super cool. This is like a wrapper for the transmission API, basically.
Yeah, the transmission RPC, or my stuff, my client built on top of that.
Cool. So I see you're typing a lot on here and like using it like, interactively. Is this like part of a larger set of like scripts or automation or like, what's actually calling this and using this? I'm sure you're not typing in all day, every day, sending files up here, right? So like, what is this tied into?
This is the Howdy SDK. So one of my tools, it's easier for me to describe by application, is something that, queries, just checks to see if it can find any new TV episodes, TV
Yeah.
shows. Okay. So what it does, it, just looks at my library. It queries the movie database typically to see, okay, the library of TV shows it has, which one, select those that you want to ignore. And the shows that haven't ended, it's getting up to be a harder and harder process. And of those, queries the movie database API, or there's a RESTful API. It queries the movie database to see, okay, identify now the new episodes that are there.
Yeah.
Okay, so, the information it gets is the episode name, basically, detail the episode coordinates. It's
Gotcha.
show, episode number, season number, episode name.
And then I'm assuming you have it hooked up to like private indexers and all that to actually search for
Not private, actually. It's all public indexers. And furthermore, there is a server called Jacket that, does you specify the public or private or semi-private, indexers. I just use the public ones. And what I pass through it, I can do it manually, but for that tool, it's through the another RESTful API to Jacket that says, okay, give me the name of this, this search, basically a search term on a given episode. And for each episode it finds, it gives, a list ordered by, filtered on a criterion, and ordered by, the most seeds plus leechers. And that's a magnet link. And so what it does, I'm showing you one part of it. One part of that snake is for each of the magnet links it finds, it plops it, as soon as it finds it, it plops it onto the transmission server through that API.
One other question. So have you heard of radar and sonar?
I have. I tried using them.
Because that is exactly what you're describing, and it is amazing. I'll tell you that. If you don't like it, reason, I'm sure you have your own bias, but it is that times a billion.
Well, that's great. There's a lot of manualness, like the Omni server. It's there's a way to use stuff like radar, I guess, or TDAR or whatever, basically saying these are the movies or TV shows that are now available. And, or rather it goes through the, request list. If it already exists, good. Okay. Query the trackers.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. It does that in a manual sense. The reason, actually, there is a story in the Sphinx documentation as well as the GitHub page. I mentioned these are great tools I've heard about, but when I tried to use them, they would bring my server to its knees because when I explored those solutions, I had a really underpowered, actual Linux desktop.
They're definitely like a little heavy, I'll tell you that for sure.
The nice thing about this is it sips, computing resources, only, 500 megabytes total when it's, or maybe even less than that, more like 250 megabytes when it's doing the automatic searching for TV shows. And then, basically going through the process, finding, episodes and then putting them on my Plex server. So in my case, it works for me. Yeah. And I haven't gotten it, I haven't had a reason to, upgrade to these more polished solutions.
Yeah, I just checked. I'm at 1.5 gigs of memory between both of those solutions right now. So they're definitely not super light, but I had this setup. I built this setup a long time ago, and eventually
Uh-huh.
I wanted to stop maintaining it because the problems you're seeing, having to like move everything's around, support new APIs, all that kind of stuff. It's exhausting.
It can
So
be, yes.
I just gave up. So
Luckily, it was a quick and dirty fix, and I think I'll maintain it
mhm,
because the transmission, the transmission server, just transmission torrent server, that solution, that implementation is much better maintained than Deluge.
mhm.
And so, I figure I might have future proofed myself a little bit. Okay, let's see what it's. Oh, 86%. Let's see. Do-do-do-do. You know what? Oh, okay. Just a few more seconds. You see, we're at 99.19%.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get to seeding.
Mhm. Also, just throw one more note in there. Those apps I talked about, and even like transmission and all that, have amazing iOS and Android apps that like integrate all those things together for like a one-click solution.
Oh,
So
Transmission has an iOS app? I didn't know that.
it integrates to something called NZB 360 on the Android side. I'm not sure what it translates to on the other side. That also integrates to Tuli, Ombi, and a bunch of all these other like common tools we're talking about.
All right. So there you go. See, Arch Linux. It took a longer time because this is a less popular ISO, but yep, here it is. It looks like it's convinces me. And with that, I think I'm pretty much done. Any other questions people might have? If you want a copy of this presentation, for instance, it has useful resource links, like, at least places to start where I cobble together,
Mhm.
these solutions, as well as for instance, the documentation for the, what is it, core underscore transmission module, or is it transmission core underscore core? It's all in the documentation. I forgot the name, but yes.
I think it's a really interesting solution because this is actually what I do 99% of the time with Python
Mhm.
is like building like wrappers, right, around like other things, other APIs, all that kind of stuff, building
Right,
on
right.
clients, all that. This is what most people I know, including you, seems like use Python for is this type of work. So
This is fun stuff. This is actually a fun hobby for me. I mean, I started developing this API, or the SDK that became Howdy,
mhm.
starting I think 6.5 years ago. And the way stuff like that works is my stuff develops organically. Okay, is it useful? Here's a bunch of methods. It starts off with a bunch of methods. Then if I keep using them a lot, it coalesces into a proto module. I don't say full module because it's not, you know, uh, set up toolized into something that you could pip install. Then it becomes that way. And then if something like, Howdy, it, goes on GitHub and, gets real Sphinx documentation. And people who are interested, I've had a few people that said, have put in merge requests. Can you fix this or that? But yeah, that's that's it in a nutshell. Uh-oh, it looks like a few people have left. I guess it was getting late. But yeah, there it is.
Cool stuff, man.
Thank you.
Very cool. And you thought you were only doing a micro presentation. That's awesome.
I
Thank
think
you.
also what he's shown here is that there's a lot of work that goes into running these Plex servers because every person I know, including me, puts immense amounts of effort into all this automation to make it run.
Oh, absolutely. And then it's kind of fun just seeing, you keep presenting on like another part of what's under the hood. But then it also has been pretty cool earlier in this year, just seeing you, I don't know, like the kind of zen of actually putting these tools into work.
I
It's
mean, it
really
was
fun.
like this is a crappy quality of this boot a video, the movie on that we were playing on Apple Play, and I was like, this is let's watch something for a few minutes while I make it happen. Basically, you saw me just do that bit of tooling to put the much higher, much better quality movie on the Plex server to
Do
replace it.
do you have
And then lo
like
and behold, there it was.
do
No
you
more
have like
blocking artifacts. The
do you have
sound
like
actually worked.
Do you have like automation so you can like specify quality and it'll search for like up to a certain quality and like replace
Oh
it?
no, no, not at that level. I
Yeah.
have filters that say only, look at
Mhm.
HEVC,
Yeah. See,
basically.
that's the hard part about this stuff, and that's where those tools I mentioned, that shit is down to a science with those tools, and it works
Well, there you go.
super well. So that's why I ended up switching over. I actually used to use something called Sick Rage back in the day, which is a precursor to these tools.
Yeah, there's couch potato too. Yeah, but
Yeah,
those are unmaintained.
those
Yeah.
are the OG tools that I was using before they became these other ones. So
But yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. If anybody want the copy, I'm of the presentation, but if nothing else, just to look at the links.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can share it.
is that gonna end up on your blog?
Yeah, yeah, it'll end up on the blog.
Cool. I
Mhm.
posted a link to that in the chat. And
It's
I'll
automation strictly for Linux ISOs, just Linux.
Yes, and Creative Commons, public domain media.
very nice. All right. Well, we've had a little attrition here in the crowd, so I'll probably just reserve my little thing that I put together for the next one.
Oh, okay, that's too bad. I'm sorry. But yeah, we did spend
No,
like 30 minutes at the
no, that's
beginning.
perfect. Hey, it's good to have some backup and not have to use it, right?
There you
Yeah.
go.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tanim and Twinkles, as always. Nick, good to see you. Good to hear things are to the point where you already got too much work.
Things are going well.
Very cool. Well, I'll try to look you up next time I'm out in Sacramento.
Yeah,
I'll let you
always,
know when
man.
that's coming down the
All right.
pipeline.
Sounds good to me. Keep in touch.
All right. And see everyone on the internet in between. Otherwise, see you in a month. Bye, party people.